Hello, this is psychicpodcasts.com. I'm Psychic Sahar. Psychicpodcasts.com welcomes Dr. PMH Atwater. Today we're going to discuss near-death experiences in adults. I hope you'll enjoy the interview. Welcome back, Dr. Atwater. It's really a pleasure to talk to you again.
Well, it's fun to be here.
We've had so much amazing downloads of the previous interviews that we did. And I thought tonight we'd like to talk about near-death experiences. You're the world's foremost authority on near-death experiences.
Well, and I'm not the most foremost, but I'm one of them.
Well, I think, to be honest, is that you've had 3 near-death experiences, and they have changed and shaped your life. And
I certainly have.
And I also noticed on your website, which is www.pmhatwater.com, that you've also published a book, An Idiot's Guide to Near-Death Experiences. For those who don't know, Dr. Atwater, can you tell us briefly what are near-death experiences or NDEs, and can anyone have them?
Well, first of all, I would like to give you the official description or explanation of the near-death experience by the International Association for Near-Death Studies.
Right.
This is what they publish. A near-death experience has been defined as a lucid experience associated with perceived consciousness apart from the body, occurring at the time of actual or threatened or imminent death. So it can be the actual clinical loss of vital signs, or it can be someone who is threatened with death but did not die, or someone who, they may have died, but we're not really sure.
Right.
It is possible to have near-death-like experiences where death is not involved at all, but someone can still have a full near-death experience with all of the after effects.
Right.
And I have chapters on the near-death-like experience in almost all of my books. So it can happen a lot of different ways, but most people have it at the edge of death. And that's where scientists come in, that's where researchers like myself come in, when we can see that there are no vital signs, yet the individual seems to be quite alive in another realm or another place or another dimension. Who's to know? We can't prove that.
Right.
Can anybody have a near-death experience? My dear, even children before birth in the womb can have one. They can have them during birth, afterward, toddlers, infants. An individual at any age can have a near-death experience. With the little ones, and we'll be talking about those tomorrow, our little tiny ones. Once verbal, they will start talking about it, describing it, or perhaps even drawing pictures.
Amazing.
Very often with children, they'll be drawing pictures of what happened to them. Or just pointing out things in the air, like a particular angel they might see, or something like this, afterward.
Right.
But right now we're talking about adults, and of course adults at any age can have them. You can have multiple experiences. I've had 3. Excuse me. The most in my particular research base of nearly... over 3,000 adult experiencers, 244 children, but my totals now are closer to 4,000 near-death experiencers that I have had personal sessions with.
Right.
I'm a field worker. I'm not a literature searcher.
Right.
I'm not, a person who goes mailing out questionnaires, although I've done a little bit of that. But I'm primarily a field worker. I'm a cop's kid. I was raised in a police station. My dad started teaching me police investigative techniques at the age of 9. If you can imagine, a 9-year-old. But anyway, that's what he did. He was very strict. So I'm a field worker. I'm out in the field, and yes, the record holder in my research base, by the way, was 23.
Wow.
He was born with just very severe physical problems. They didn't think he'd live past the age of 6 months. He did, he just had so many near-death experiences throughout his life.
Amazing.
Now, I met him when he was in his early 40s.
Right.
So he had really confounded the medical community by then.
Right.
And I asked him, why so many?
Yes.
And he felt that the reason he had had so many is because the near-death experience is what gave him the courage and the strength to keep living. That without these experiences, he would have long since died.
Fascinating.
So that was his idea of why.
So can they be self-triggered?
Not that I know of. I have yet to come across any that were self-triggered.
So you researched, the person that you researched, he just simply had them 23 times.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But with this one gentleman, of course, there were one crisis after another in his life.
Amazing.
As you can well understand. This is a man who had severe physical problems. It was a miracle he ever lived. Even lived to be the 1-year-old, let alone 40. So this is a man who continued to have severe medical problems.
Yes, I understand.
So he continued to have near-death experiences. Does it always work that way? No, it doesn't. You can die or nearly die and not have one. If we look across the general population, I'm speaking now in the world, we have figures now between 12 to 20% of the population anywhere will have a near-death experience.
That's quite high.
We know that thanks to the work of Pim van Lommel, that incredible cardiologist in Holland, and also various other people who've now been able to verify Pim's finding about near-death experiences, the percentage in the general population.
That's quite a high percentage.
Between 12 to 20%, depending on the country, whatever. There are mainly 4 types of near-death experiences. No, there's not just one.
Right.
That's the mythology. The mythology says that, you die, you're met by loved ones, you go up through the tunnel toward a light, or into a city, or into a library, and you have this incredible experience, and you talk to people, and then you come back, and you're filled with all this love and knowing. It doesn't always happen that way. In fact, very seldom do they happen that way. In my research base, less than 1/3 ever had the tunnel, for instance.
Interesting.
If you're back in 1982 when Gallup poll first did the first poll or survey on these experiences, less than 9% have them. You didn't have a lot of people claiming that they experienced the tunnel until after Raymond Moody's book
came out.
Popular.
Yes.
After it became popular, then a lot of people then...
It became like a stereotyped image. Yes.
Maybe they didn't have a word for it before, or maybe in their thinking they thought, well, if I say I had a tunnel, then that's okay because that makes me a true experience.
Yeah, it validates the experience. Yes.
All the rest of their experience, they had valid elements, but they were embarrassed or thought, and maybe mine's not a true experience. I think I'll just add the tunnel. And I was in several near-death groups, and I was in with several people who had had a near-death experience, and I was there personally when they did that. So I know that it has been done. I don't know how many people do that. But, I really respect these people nonetheless because it still is a little kind of funny and strange and crazy if you talk about this kind of thing, and you just want to make sure that when you talk about it, you're talking about what people are familiar with. So I can understand the fear factor or that kind of
apprehension to talk about it. Yeah,
it's kind of an edgy thing, whether they really want to talk about it or not.
Right.
But when you're talking about the near-death experience, I jump right in and remind people that it's the after effects that validate the experience. The near-death experience is one side of the coin. The after effects are the other side of the coin. So what I talk about now is the near-death phenomenon, not just the near-death experience.
Right.
The phenomenon includes the after effects plus the experience.
Can we... sorry, Dr. Atwater. You mentioned 4 types of near-death experiences.
Yes. There is the initial experience.
Yes.
Some people call it the non-experience.
Right.
And it involves elements such as the loving nothingness, or the friendly dark, or a living voice of some kind, a brief out-of-body experience, maybe a manifestation of some type.
Right.
And just maybe 1 or 2 of those, 3 max, and that's all there is to it.
Right.
They're short, they're not that complex, and 76% of the kids have them. 20% of the adults have them. But how you can tell if they're valid is if they start showing the pattern of after effects. And the after effects are just as physiological as they are psychological. So let's get into this second one. I don't want to leave these out. The unpleasant or hell-like experience. That's something like an encounter with a threatening void, or stark limbo, or hellish purgatory, or a terrible storm, or a whirlpool, or a vortex, or scenes of some kind of startling or unexpected indifference, even hauntings from one's own past. And these are not at all rare. Don't believe anybody who says they're rare. In my research base, 1 out of 7. In Dr. Maurice Rawlings, 1 out of 5. I really, truly feel that if we could get people to open up about these, and they don't, most of them don't. If we could get them to open up about them, I would think the percentages would be a lot closer to 30%. Or about 1/3, because a lot of people have these,
to talk about
but
them.
they won't talk about them.
That's right.
They just won't. They're embarrassed or they're scared or whatever. Then we have the pleasant or heaven-like experience. This is what people are more familiar with.
Right. This
is what's in the books, what's in the magazines, what's on television, what's in the movies, what's in the documentaries.
Right.
Yet, only about 47% of the adults have it, and about 19% of the kids have it.
Right.
So, we get all excited, and we talk about a particular experience that not even half of the people have.
Right.
Close to half, but not quite half. This idea of loving family reunions, and maybe religious figures or reassuring angels, validation that life counts, affirmative and inspiring dialogue. That's what we hear the most about, but that's not what even 50% of the cases are truly cover.
Right.
And then we have the transcendent experience. That's the one that breaks all the rules. People in that one are just as apt to hop a light ray and tour the universe as they are to wind up in some kind of heavenly college taking classes. I mean, these are complex. These are long. These are usually involved. Very seldom does a transcendent experience have a life review. Very seldom is it personal. It almost always has to do with the human family or history or what that individual could do to help the human family when they get back. So the people who come back from a transcendent experience are usually the movers and shakers. Now, I'm not saying that the other people aren't also, but by percentages, you tend to get more of these really dynamic people who are absolutely dedicated
Amazing.
to making a change in society and in history because of their experience.
To help humanity, yes.
Yeah, I mean, they really come back intense about, most of them, not all, but most of them do.
Yes.
The idea of becoming a healer afterward, that's typical. Most people do. Most people continue to have out-of-body experiences afterward, see angels and light beings afterward, become very knowing and giving, very generous afterward. Most of them do. Most of them come back with electrical sensitivity. That is to say, they can't wear watches or they blow out light bulbs or they walk by a television set that switches channels and they didn't do anything. All they did was walk by it. I can tell you all kinds of stories about electrical sensitivity because I have it too. I could go on and on and on about that one. 73, it's either 73% or 75%. I don't remember the exact number right now. But a high percentage of near-death experiences, adult or children, will come back with electrical sensitivity.
That's amazing.
So that's really common. Let me just kind of trip through the after effects.
Please.
The physiological ones you hear the least about. Okay, the most common, 80 to 95% of the experiencers will display. They're more sensitive to light, especially sunlight. They're more sensitive to sound. Taste in music often changes. They look younger, act younger. Now, we're talking adults here, more playful. But if we're talking about kids, they tend to look older, act older, and more mature. You know,
they're changed.
It flips.
Yes.
Yeah, it flips. Substantial change in energy levels can have energy surges, changes in thought processing, switch from sequential selective thinking to clustered or abstract thinking, where it all comes in at once and you wonder where it came from, and acceptance of ambiguity, insatiable curiosity, lower blood pressure. That's one of the signature features of a near-death experience.
Really? The lower blood pressure?
It lowers the blood pressure. Absolutely. And increases the energy. Bright skin and eyes, reversal of brain hemisphere dominance is commonplace.
Amazing.
So if you were left brain before, you tend to come back right brain. If you were right brain before, you tend to come back left brain. So it tends to switch, and you heal quicker from injuries. Now, if you want to look at those from 50 to 79%, and that's still a large clunk, reversal of the body clock. If you were a night person before, you come back a morning person. If you were a morning person before, you come back a night person.
Interesting.
Of course, electrical sensitivity, heightened intelligence, metabolic changes. My dear, let me get this word out. Very few experiencers, adult or child, can handle or tolerate pharmaceuticals afterward. If they do, it's got to be lower doses. I'm saying to most of them or all of them, get on to homeopathy, herbs, vitamins and minerals, and get off of pharmaceuticals. They just can't handle them.
That's amazing. I'm sure my listeners would be fascinated. I mean, it's wonderful to know all of these things, yes.
Well, there's all kinds of metabolic changes, like you tend to have more bowel movements. They tend to come quicker. Doesn't take as long
more energized,
for the body
it feels
to process
to me.
food. You assimilate substances into the bloodstream quicker. Takes less of something for the full effect. That's why pharmaceuticals can sometimes be troublesome. And I'm not saying get off all pharmaceuticals, because obviously we need them. But, really look at that and kind of test that out, and maybe you want to take less of it, or maybe you want to really study homeopathy.
Wonderful.
And heightened response to taste, touch, texture, and smell, pressure, more creative and inventive, synesthesia, which is multiple sensing. We now have clinical studies on multiple sensing. That's an enlargement or an enhancement of the limbic system in the brain, where you get things in multiples. Let me give you an example. Very often a near-death experience will buy a painting for their home based on how it sounds, not how it looks.
Yes.
You know, you're going to get this input in multiples. Increased allergies, preference for more vegetables and less meat if you're an adult. Just the opposite with the kids. They love their meat. They don't like veggies that well. I don't know why it switches that way, but it does. Latent talent surface. There are indications of brain structure function changes, that the actual brain organ changes. Also changes to the nervous and digestive system and skin sensitivity. So we're talking really physiological changes here. We're not just talking about a change of attitude, becoming more loving and generous. We're talking about a physical event. None of the skeptics, none of the objections to the near-death experience, none of those have held up in in-depth research, not one. All of them have been overturned in near-death research, in solid near-death research. All of them have been overturned, not one of them.
Dr. Atwater, that's fascinating, and I hope our listeners are curious and as interested as I am to find out more by reading your books, and of course you have a lot of information on your website as well. Would you come back and talk to us again? I mean, we're going to talk hopefully about children, but it would be absolutely wonderful to have you again to be our guest on psychicpodcasts.com.
Well, I can do a little bit of it. I can't do it. I've got to get back into another book.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, much love and big hugs to everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atwater.
Coming holiday and blessed season, may you all have a most blessed time with your families and with yourself.
Thank you very much indeed, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. For more information on Dr. Atwater's work, please check her website, www.pmhatwater.com. And stay tuned for more interviews from psychicpodcasts.com.